We're learning a series of classes on a Sicha. The way this works, we learn every week a Sicha, a whole Sicha. Which means we don't read everything, we do a little bit. And we're journeying through the Chumash. So we had 2 years ago, more or less, what we called the Ovis, the Sichos of Rabbi and Yankiv. Last year we had what we called Yossi and his brothers. This year's Sichos are called Exile and Redemption. In other words, we started off with Shmois. We actually started in the middle of the year because we're finishing last year's Chayves. But the discussion of this year's Sichos are Exile and Redemption. The last two classes were about Moshe Rabbeinu. If we're going to talk about the Jewish people being exiled and the Jewish people being redeemed, one of the significant factors is the Redeemer. Hashem chose to redeem us from Egypt through a person, through a Redeemer. You know that there's a Gemara that says Mashiach is going to come, Hashem is going to redeem us by himself. There's going to be no Mashiach. Ein la Mashiach liYisrael. But for all kinds of very, very deep reasons, it's klayachal important to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not just that we be redeemed, but that there should be a human being who is the prophet of God, on whom godliness rests, on whom the Shekhinah rests, who acts as the Redeemer. So the last two classes discussed the Redeemer. The first of those classes discussed the fact that, ironically, the Redeemer of the Jewish people didn't suffer. He wasn't at all a part of the exile. In fact, his mother was not conceived in Egypt. We try to link him to before the slavery started altogether. Then the most recent class talked about the fact how this Redeemer, who is emphatically associated with before the exile, is placed in the river Nile. And the Rebbe has this whole discussion. It's based on a Rogatchover of all things. But the point that the Rebbe makes that by Moshe Rabbeinu being placed in the river the Nile, he breaks the klipa of Egypt. He breaks two things. He breaks the Avodah Zarah, he breaks the idol of Egypt, and as a consequence, he breaks the exile of Egypt. So Moshe's being placed in the river, the Nile, is not only a technical thing. His mother was trying to save his life, so she places him in the river. There's something much, much more meaningful and metaphysical about it. Here's another class, another sikh. This sikha further develops our understanding of the Redeemer, of Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, we know about the Golus. We're going to learn about the Geula. Now we're learning about the Goyel, the Redeemer. And again, a very powerful idea is introduced. The koyach that Moshe Rabbeinu has to redeem the Jewish people comes from the fact that he's above it all together. He's completely above the whole situation. Okay, this sikha, you have only 4 pages of it. And if you look at my underlines, which is what we're going to learn, we're basically going to learn 2 pages and then 2 paragraphs. This is a very famous sikha. It's actually a Zayin Oder sikha. Tomorrow happens to be Zayin Oder, where we wonder why it's a big deal. Moshe Haman HaRasha knows when Moshe Rabbeinu died, and he doesn't know when Moshe Rabbeinu was born. So the question that Rebbe asks is, if Haman knew when Moshe died, he didn't know when he was born? And the answer is very simple. Haman didn't think it mattered. Why not? When a person is born, they're a nobody. They're a clean slate. When a person dies, you know what they've become. You're not born a tzaddik. You die a tzaddik. So if a tzaddik dies, it's a bad day. What about the fact that he was born on the same day? When he was born, he wasn't a tzaddik. So what was Haman's miscalculation? Why was he wrong? Because Moshe is a different kind of tzaddik. Most tzaddikim, on the day they're born, they're a potential tzaddik. Moshe Rabbeinu, the moment he was born, was already Moshe Rabbeinu. How do we know? It says in the Torah, Vatera Eisei Ki Tevhu. Yocheved has this little baby, and the Bas Parev, the princess in Egypt, also recognizes Ki Tev, that he's good. So, Yocheved, the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, gives birth to Moshe Rabbeinu. As soon as he is born, she sees that he is good. Says Rashi, Nismala Habayeth Kula Oira. At the moment of the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, the house is filled with light. So Moshe Rabbeinu was a very, very unusual child. Not only is he a tzaddik who can redeem the Jewish people, he's a tzaddik me'ikarim. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu is one of those rare neshamas who came into this world from the moment of his birth, you could almost say without free will. He didn't have an option of failure. He had to succeed. Why? So I'm sure there's many explanations. But the explanation that I think would sit most familiarly with people who learn Hasidus is because Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't a private soul. He was a general soul, he was a public soul. He represented all of us. He belonged to every Jew. Every Yiddish neshama comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. All of our neshamas are included in Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama. So Moshe Rabbeinu is our head. His being our head means he's not himself, he's ours. And as an individual person, anybody can sin. But as the head of a nation, as the head of the Jewish people don't let Moshe Rabbeinu sin. There's a story, Alter Rebbe had a chassid whose name was Rabbi Isaac Homler. Rabbi Isaac Homler was a very great chassid, wasn't a radical, but he said some radical things because they were true. He said, Adam Rishon was not a Rebbe. Adam Rishon, Adam, the first man, was not a Rebbe, which is a very strange thing to say. Why? Because Adam Rishon is the most general of general souls. Adam Rishon's neshama includes every soul that will ever exist. And Rabbi Isaac Homler said, if Adam Rishon were a Rebbe, he could never have sinned. So the question is, what do you mean he wasn't a Rebbe? He was the most general of souls? And the answer is very simple. Yeah, he was the most general of souls. But he didn't have chassidim. He didn't have a following. He didn't have people. A leader who has a people, the people keep him. He's the head of the people, but the people protect him. Moshe Rabbeinu was born to be the leader of the Jewish people. At the moment of his birth, therefore, he was a tzaddik. Haman didn't understand that. Haman understood graduating as a tzaddik, finishing your life as a tzaddik. But the notion that the Eibishter gave Jewish people leadership, that the moment they're born, Nismala Abayis Kula Oida, the house is filled with light, this escaped Haman Arash. So today's class is about this idea. What is the significance? What is the meaning of Moshe Rabbeinu's birth? At the moment Moshe Rabbeinu's birth, Moshe Rabbeinu is already a tzaddik, and the house is filled with light. I suppose you'll say it's in line with, it's similar to the Sikh we did 2 weeks ago, that Moshe was above the exile. In order to be the Redeemer, he couldn't suffer with the Jews in the exile, as Miriam did, and as Aaron did. But the word Miriam means mar, bitter. His capacity to redeem us is because he was completely above the exile. Here is another Sikh making a similar point, using a different form. What is the form? The form is the idea that Moshe was Moshe from the moment he was born. Because he's a different kind of creature altogether. Okay? So let's read. Now you know how these classes work. The way these classes work is if you follow what I underlined, you won't get lost. In other words, I don't read everything. I read only the underline. And basically I underline the second column of page 2 and most of page 3. With that X's, I'm going to skip. So if you'll follow with me, I gave you more than enough copies. If you'll follow with me, you'll have no trouble. You won't follow with me, then you'll have trouble. Okay, here we go. Afal P, even though, as the cloud, there's a rule. Fentev yem hameves meyem yivolde. That the day a person dies is greater than the day a person is born. Why? Because on the day a person dies, we know what's become of them. On the day a person is born, we don't know yet what will become of the person. It says the Rebbe is shayech by kol adam, afilu by tzadikim, is applicable to every person, even to the righteous. Val ein adam yedei ma'maisav, nobody knows what a person is going to do with his life, even a tzaddik. Says the Rebbe is aber Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu, in them, in this area, he's different. Moshe is not like everybody, he's not even like every tzaddik. Moshe's righteousness is determined at the moment he's born. Val ba'leidase shel Moshe, at the moment of his birth, of Moshe, Zok the Pasuk says, Vateire eise kitev, she saw that he's good. Und wie Chazal seinen das mefarish, as the rabbis interpret, as Bishar Shaneled Moshe, at the moment Moshe Rabbeinu was born, Nismal Abayis Kuliyah, the entire house is filled with light, and the Rebbe says in Yiddish, as Tekef, beim Gebäuden werden, at the moment of birth, Hot Moshe, Hot in Moshe Meir given, immediately irradiated within Moshe Rabbeinu, dem Oyer HaShechina, the light of the Shechina. And by the way, if you look at footnote 15, you see that he brings a Zayar to support this. Be'efen as das hat beleuchten dem ganzen Bias. It filled up the entire house. The entire house was filled with the light of the Shechina, which was already then on Moshe Rabbeinu. That's haste in other words. Afal piyad b'shas der yid. Yiyeh misha yiyeh v'et geboren, even though normally, when a Jew is born, no matter who he is, a tzaddik, a beini, a rasha, vet mit zayin etzem leida, with the fact that he's born, ufkitona nayam shachaf and alakus and velt. Of course, when a Jew comes into the world, that's more godliness in the world. As is another soul descended. And what is a soul? Was is chelik elakami mal mamish, and the neshama is a piece of Hashem from above mamish. Valachas kama v'kama eider kind hat a neshama from a tzaddik. Certainly, if that child has a neshama of a tzaddik, more kedusha is added to the world. Now go to page 3, please. Page 3 is abed. Though it's true that the birth of every Jew brings godliness into the world, benegeya yidin b'chlal, in as much as other Jews is concerned, nitshayich zu zog. It's impossible to say, as shein b'sha'as leidosim, immediately when they are born, is done inyan from Eir V'gil. There's a concept of light and revelation. True, every Jew brings more godliness into the world, but we don't know yet how that godliness is going to manifest till that person lives. Varum di neshama is doch behelem in guf. Everybody knows the neshama may be godly, but it's hidden within the body. Und der gilui von Eir neshama, the ability to reveal the light of the neshama through the guf, is taloi, depends in bidur v'zichach haguf ayedei ha'avodah, and the clarity and refinement that we bring to our body through our work. Was mer men edel ois dem guf, the more we refine the body, als mer an pletzich the neshama, the more the neshama is revealed, und es leicht durch ihr Gettlichkeit, and it shines through her godliness in der Welt, in the world. So by most people, and the Faris Dokman, this is why it's true, that Tev Yem HaMavis, maybe the day a person dies is greater than the day a person is born, while the Keiches Ruchnim Vasayid Bakumt, the spiritual strength the person is given. On the day he's born are only potential. If a person doesn't know what his deeds are, when are the actions of a person revealed and perfect and whole and peaceful, the day a person dies. So the Rabbi says everybody who is born brings godliness into the world. But how that godliness is going to show itself, how that godliness is going to mature, to use a business term, is yet to be known. Mashein came by Moshe. Girl, if you lost the place, page 3 here. Okay? Mashein came by Moshe, the post of Moshe Rabbeinu, is gleich by Leidah. Say the moment he's born, Nismala bayis kula air, the house is filled with light. In other words, by im, in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu, is there oil, the light of the neshama. Shein devil given an oil, was already then a light. Vasat meir given, which was revealed, bepoyel ubagala, actually, and in a revealed way. In other words, Moshe didn't become Moshe, he was Moshe. There's an expression, the Friedrich Rebbe, in his Sichos, talks about people. And he divides people into 3 categories. Chitzen, Pnimi, Atzmi. Chitzen means a superficial person. Pnimi means a deep person and a real person. Atzmi means a Rebbe. Atzmi means a person whose all of his motivations come from inside of himself. Most people's motivations come from inside themselves, compounded by their environment. An Atzmi, all of his motivation comes from inside of himself. So you have a superficial person, a deep person, and an Atzmi, an essence person. So the Friedrich Rebbe tells a number of stories. There's a story about the Mittel Rebbe like this, and there's a story about the Rebbe Marash, where he says when the Rabbeim were very little, they would say things that they themselves didn't understand. When the Rebbes were so little, they would speak ideas that were so profound, they didn't understand what they were saying. They were atzmiyim, in other words, they had these incredibly great neshamas, so they spoke truth, but their minds were not sufficiently developed to appreciate what they were saying. This is a mushal. Moshe Rabbeinu was kitov. The moment he was born, he was Moshe. He was a baby. He had to suckle, right? He had to nurse. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't born talking and walking and reading Gemara, but that was a technical problem with him, because the neshama was entirely on the surface. So by Moshe Rabbeinu, the moment he's born, he fills the world with light. It says, Nitken Kasha, bottom of page 3, first column. It's not a question. Der fun was the Medrash Gufa, from the fact that the Medrash itself, Darshan dem Pasuk Teim Yem Amovas maybe Volde, Eif beneged to Moshe. The Medrash also uses Moshe Rabbeinu as an example, that the day a person dies is greater than the day a person is born. Why? B'shas meret vegin masav. When you're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu accomplished, masav his deeds, teirasa his teira, avidasa in his work for Moshe Rabbeinu, is avade in dem faranan ilui b'yem amavas laga b'yem ivaldu. When Moshe Rabbeinu finished his life, he was very accomplished. When Moshe Rabbeinu began his life, he wasn't accomplished. So in terms of his accomplishments, the day he passes away is greater than the day he was born. The day Moshe is born, before Moshe does anything, all that he's going to accomplish later, only potential. The wholeness, perfection, and peacefulness of his actions and his Torah and his work is accomplished perfectly only when he dies. It's true even for Moshe that the day he passes away he did good deeds, as opposed to the day he was born. However, at the same time, that the light which shone when Moshe was born is verbunden mit etzem nishmas Moshe, is connected to the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu that exists on a level which we call essence. A koyach for nishmas Moshe, it's a power or potential of Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama. Says an inyan, it's an idea versus nitoli and avedasa beguf. It doesn't have any connection with what a person is going to do in this life. Therefore, it's shown in an actual way. Take it be'es leidasi at the moment he's born. Noch eidid edes shaykh is given to avedi before he has a connection to actual practical work. So there's two things, Tafi. Moshe Rabbeinu's accomplishments are completed when he dies, but Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama is completed when he's born. So what's the point? The point is Moshe is our Redeemer. And one of the characteristics of Moshe as our Redeemer is that not he wins his struggles. He's above them. His ability to redeem us from the Golos is because his essence is revealed, and therefore at the moment he's born, the house is filled with light. Okay? So Moshe Rabbeinu again is very different. Moshe Rabbeinu is our Redeemer, and ironically, the qualifications that he has for being our Redeemer is that we and him have nothing in common. Nothing. He didn't live in Egypt. He didn't suffer in slavery. Didn't suffer with us. And now we're finding out the moment he was born, he's already a tzaddik. The house is filled with light. And this is the source of redemption for the Jewish people. So we're going to read a little bit of the explanation. Just a little bit. So at the bottom of page 3. Bottom of page 3, second paragraph from the bottom, it says, Biur HaBechaya. There's a commentary from the Rabbeinu Bechaya in Dem Maimeh Chazal on this rabbinic statement, Nismala Kalabayas Eira, that the house was filled with light. What does it mean? The Rabbeinu Bechaya is one of my favorite Mefarshim. His edition explains what it means that the house was filled with light. Quote, as Moshe Rabbeinu Matchilas Teldosei, Moshe Rabbeinu for the moment of his birth, Hayeroi Lahoyer is called Ha'ilam, was qualified, was already fit to illuminate the whole world, al yedei ha-Torah, through the Torah. What is the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu's birth, before he does anything, brings light into this world, and we say his neshama is already revealed on a level of essence and it's perfect? Torah. Therefore, this verstandig, which teaches us as die tchune, this characteristic, for nishmas Moshe, of the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, that from the moment he's born is perfect, is given zugepas, turn the page, in zugebunden zu in Yana Shal Torah, is apropos because it's connected to Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu represents Torah. Because Moshe Rabbeinu represents Torah, the moment he's born he's perfect. What do we know about Torah? Read on. Ein emes ala Torah. Torah is truth. The Iyun from Torah is emes. The concept of Torah in truth is truth. Now what is truth? What's the truth? The opposite of lie. Right? So the Rebbe, not true. That emes abadait von emes is, the true meaning of the word truth, nit nor di shlila von hepech emes sheker. Truth is not only not a falsehood. Nor emes meant, truth means, an inyan in velchas is nitshayach kein shinui, the kind of thing that never will change. Says nitzchiistik, it's eternal. U'b'lashein ha'kosav, in the words of the pasuk, sfas emes, the edge of truth, tikin la'ad stands forever. If something is real, it never changes. If something is here today and gone tomorrow, it's not even true today. Second column, page 4 at the top. Und das ist der Inyan von Teiras Emes. That's what the Torah of truth is. That v'nasan lanu Teiras Emes. Hashem gave us the Torah of truth. As Torah is nitzchias, Torah is eternal. Says nitshayches and ir kain Inyan shashinai. The Torah never changes. Moshe represents Emes. Moshe represents Torah. Torah never changes. What the Rebbe does is like this. Torah before the world was very holy. Torah in the world is very practical. Torah l'asad love is very holy again. It never changes. From the height it enjoyed before manifestation to the lowliness it engaged with during manifestation, and the greater loftiness achieves after it's culminated, Torah never changes. That's emes. Moshe Rabbeinu's inyan is Torah and emes. This is why he's born perfect. Go to the left of page 5. Und das ist die Asbara. This is the explanation of the fact. Das was Moshe Rabbeinu mitchilas tel dase. As soon as Moshe is born, Hayaroi la hayar, he brought light into the world. Why? Ayadei Torah, because he represents the Torah. The idea and measure of Moshe is midas emes. It's emes. Emes Moshe. The Gemara says, the Medrash says, emes is Moshe Rabbeinu. Was the far that therefore as durach im gegeben geworden Torah emes, he gives us the Torah which is true. Moshe emes for Torah say emes. Moshe Rabbeinu is true, and his Torah is true. So we have now an idea. We have an explanation, and we also have a justification. The idea is that Moshe is a tzaddik from the moment he's born, and the reason Moshe Rabbeinu was a tzaddik from the moment he's born because of the connection to Torah, and Torah is above change. Okay, that's it. Questions or comments? Go ahead.
So, to say that, like, I understand, like, when you're born and when you pass away, like, the whole thing, but, like, shouldn't it be, like, when you're born, it's like, it should be like the opposite. It should be like, why do people like cry when somebody passes away, and people are like rejoicing when there's a baby born, when it should be like the reverse?
That is really a profound question. It's a very interesting question. It's a great question.
No, but like the kid hasn't even like.
Why do people celebrate at weddings?
Maybe they should celebrate them 6 years after marriage.
5 years would be fine too. 5 years would be fine too. Maybe even 12 months. It's an interesting question. And the real answer to the question is, the celebration is hopeful. The simcha of a chasana is to give a koyach for the chasana. In other words, you're right. Everything is potential. You're celebrating not an end. You're celebrating a possibility. Now, the reason you celebrate at the beginning and not at the end is a very simple rule of life. Possibilities are always grander than actualities. I assure you it's not worth quoting. Possibilities are always grander than actualities. What's the word for possible in Hebrew? What's the word in Hebrew for possibility? I'm playing around with your minds. V'haya. What does v'haya mean? What does v'haya mean? Come on! It will be. V'haya im shamaya, right? What is the Hebrew word for actualities? Vayehi. And it was, right? Like Vayehi b'mei Achashverosh. So what does the Gemara say about v'haya, and what does the Gemara say about Vayehi? Ein v'haya ela loshen simcha, ein v'haya vayehi ela loshen tzar. What will be is always happy. What's happened is always not happy. The word v'haya in Chumash, it will be in the future, is always a happy term.
So it's kind of like
Vayehi, it has already been, is always a negative term. Why? Because the prospect, the possibility, the promise is always greater than the reality. That's what you're celebrating. But the celebration of prospect and promise is exactly that. It's prospect and promise. When the person's life is over, they've never achieved, no one ever achieves their full promise, their full potential, but they've achieved something. And you cry for the loss of that something. You don't cry for what the person didn't accomplish. You cry for what the person did accomplish. When your person is born and you're celebrating what could happen. When a person passes away and you cry, you're not crying for what the person could have been, but what the person was in reality.